Okay. Ooh, here we are. Okay, guys, thanks very much for coming. Sorry for the delay. It's my fault, not anyone else's who is here. If you want to shuffle forward a little bit so that people from outside can come in if they want to. Nice one. Okay, so we've got 4 people on the panel here. Before we go on, I'm just going to get everyone to introduce themselves and in 1 minute speak about which side of the argument they're on and why. But if you could just condense that into 1 minute, thanks. Starting with Rasheen.
Hi, so I'm Rasheen and I'm here from the Liberal Democrats. I live in Chessington locally and I'm speaking for the Remain campaign. For me, Remain, I'm voting kind of on 2 factors. The first one is it is quite ideological. I do believe in the EU and the European project. But the second one is it's about the economy for me. And I believe that the UK economy is better if we stronger as we remain in the EU.
Okay, so going across from left to right as we're looking.
Good afternoon, my name is Oliver Turnbull. I'm a local businessman, originally from Cornwall, grew up in Kingston 10 years ago. I'm a political consultant around the world, worked with 6-7 different national governments and big election campaigns, so I have a decent view of the world. Not a life on the political party. 55% out, 45% in going. The big issues that maybe swung it for me, the future direction of the EU, Doug worries me, the current EU president worries me. Getting us into things that maybe I don't think are in our national interests. I'm very pro-immigration, and actually I want to see more immigration, so there's right question left for that. But, I'm sure it's going to get a question later.
I'm Max Fraser. I'm here from the Kingston branch of Britain Stronger in Europe. I don't quite have a resume for people older than me. I'm quite a young idealist. I basically see the European question currently is not a sort of yes-no argument. It's asking you, the people, to judge something as that, judging the risks, judging which people you believe in, which projects you believe in. And I think that when you balance the huge risk of shock to our economy, risk to global security, as obviously say, don't just take my word for it, take away Obama, Christine Lagarde. I'm just someone who seems to think that on a basic level we're taught this from the age of 9, but we should maybe work together to achieve things which we can't just achieve on our own, things like solving tax havens across the world, security, global warming. We're not going to sort of face these challenges, our generation, in the next 100 years by leaping to extremism and being isolationist.
Good afternoon, I'm Patrick Wild. I represent the Vote Leave branch in Kingston. I take a slightly more sentimental approach to this whole debate. I've been very Eurosceptic ever since the day I fundamentally found out about the constitutional difference between Europe, i.e. the continent, and the European Union in its current standing. I feel, as the 5th largest economy globally, the UK has suffered at the hands of unaccounted, undemocratic bureaucracy, and we do well to take away some of those overinflated tariff barriers, improve our own suppressed quota systems. When you're looking at something like 17% of all quota within the UK on a 250-mile North Sea territory quota, it's robbed livelihoods, and I've seen it firsthand, unfortunately.
Okay, guys, so that's our panel. So we're going to take a kind of question time styled debate here. So I'm Dimbleby in this case. And so we've got some questions. No, never. So we've got some questions from the crowd and some that have been tweeted in. But for the first one, we'll start with Tom Buxton, please, for your question.
So I keep seeing a lot of discussion about leaving the EU may affect small local independent businesses, and I would like to ask, how will that affect businesses if we do leave the EU, and what will change?
Okay, and so we're going to change this up, and so let's start from stage left with Patrick, please.
Lovely. Well, ultimately, small to medium-sized businesses have suffered at the hands of EU bureaucracy, as I mentioned before, at the hands of this dodgy, unaccounted for quota system. We've seen the likes, we've seen huge tax evasion, we've seen the very Goldman Sachs, the very big organisations, I'm sorry to say, that are at the forefront of the industry, and it's making us, telling us that we've got to remain within the EU Commission. I'm sorry to say, with the dodgy quota system, I mentioned 7% fishermen's agricultural that's just one example. I'm sorry to say, that's just a little example. Small, medium-sized businesses are struggling under EU tariffs. It might look good on paper, all free trade from France, Spain, Germany. The fundamental issue is the EU market, the single market, if you like, is facing a deficit year on year out, as it has done for the past decades. The UK, as the fifth largest economy, can do better, and I'd like to see small, medium-sized businesses progress, avert from the tariffs and go global.
Okay. Machine, you said about the economy in Europe overstated, so one for you, I think.
I think the truth is we don't know. If I'm being really honest with you, if you look at kind of economic predictions, so I'm going to disclaim this is a client of mine that I'm citing here, the Economist Intelligence Unit. They estimate 6% by 2020 if we're to leave the European Union. So obviously that will have an impact on small and medium-sized businesses if there is less money in people's pockets, which economists have said, but I say in truth we don't know. I mean, also again, if you're talking about trade deals, it sounds awful, but again we don't know because we don't know what we don't know full details what David Cameron negotiated with the EU, but also we don't know what the state of the trade deals will actually be if we leave the EU. It could well be the case that what we will actually do is get a team of top international lawyers in and we'll negotiate exactly what we're currently doing at the moment, but we just won't be in the EU, or there will be something completely different. But I know that sounds really awful, but it's the truth. Nobody actually knows because nobody's actually
Local businessman, Oliver.
Real micro level can make no difference. Because actually, if we really think about it, as my business won't change on Friday morning for it. I actually benefit a lot from Labour coming into the UK. My business does. Kingston benefits. A lot of people come from the EU into local business. So this is a bit weird from some of that. On this issue, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of difference. And actually, one of the big things, a lot of the EU regulations, maybe coming from my outside now, is that 85% of small business doesn't trade with the EU. So we actually have to work all these regulations without trading with them. Now, if I'm a big national company, yeah, great, we're going to trade with the EU. I trade more with America than Australia, they're my national company. So, I don't think it would be a great difference either way. And that's probably one of these point trip issues that you could either fall 5% either way on that issue, but not a huge difference.
And lastly,
I'd say that you're right. We'll wake up on a Friday morning and obviously immediately it's not going to be like all the money in the world has gone vanished from our pockets. But in the long term, these regulations, which are supposedly being forced on us, evil directives, which people seem to confuse for common fisheries and common agricultural projects, which have nothing to do with small businesses, and you seem to confuse quotas, which also have nothing to do with small businesses. In actual fact, if you actually listen to the CBI, who represent small businesses, they say that there's a benefit. These regulations of things like maternity pay, equal rights for people of different skin colour or religion. I mean, these aren't horrific regulations being forced on us. We're already the second. Don't just take my word for it, take the word of the Financial Times, take the word of the CBI, take the word of many other people. And you talk about how you trade mostly with the United States, with Australia. Well, why don't you listen to the heads of the United States, or Obama, who says we'll be at the back of the queue for any further trade deals, or Malcolm Turnbull, who says Australia, but we should vote in. I think we have to listen to the people we trade with.
Patrick, shake me out a lot there.
I'd say a couple of points there. I don't think you can take the words of Barack Obama too literally when he's saying, the UK is going to be pushed at the back of the queue by means of a free trade agreement. There's two problems with that. One, they don't actually use the term queue in America as the back of the line. Secondly, the EU and the US don't even have a free trade agreement at the moment, so I don't understand what the benefits are.
Machine, we're pretty machine.
No, I mean, I was actually going to pick up on the point about, come Friday morning, not much will have changed. I think the biggest kind of business impact we've seen will not be on SMEs, it will actually be on hedge fund managers. I work with hedge fund managers who are already looking at, okay, if we leave, we're not waiting 2 years to see what negotiation is, we're moving our office to Frankfurt on the Monday. Because for them, it's more beneficial, and it will be the knock-on effect of that as opposed to a direct impact on small businesses. That's my understanding of the matter anyway.
Anyone from the floor with any points on this? Yeah.
I think the EU would be deeply affected. You know, I think this is actually one of the big things. You know, we're one of 5 members who actually pay into the EU. You know, the other 20 odd take out the EU. So when suddenly the EU always have a budget deficit, you know, our government is terrible at running a budget. You know, whether it be Labour, Conservative. Let's be honest now. I've lived with 2, great governments apparently independently you speak to. They can't run a budget. They can't run a deficit. They lie all the time at debts. All these fancy terms with spin figures. Now the EU are no different than Trump actually been on the scale. That's one of the things that just kills me from a wider point of view. I don't trust anything. You know, I don't trust no politician, but I need to trust 2 different sets. And I think actually the EU will have a huge problem because the EU, we are the biggest trading partner for the EU, Britain. Yeah? Germany are not going to start saying we're not going to trade with Britain anymore. Okay, France aren't going to say that because they'll be in the deepest recession they've ever been in. Okay, and you think our economy, we've got some great growth, and we mess it up. You run other things. But look at the French, the Italian economy, the Spanish economies. You know, youth unemployment rates nearly hit 50%. You know, it will shock rates. It will shock rates through the whole.
To
No, I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think actually, you know, if you look at kind of French media, if you look at Le Monde, Les Echos, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in France. If you look at the Dutch market as well, if we vote to leave, I think we will start seeing consolidation other referendums across the Eurozone. But I also, I mean, I think we're at this point where we could actually, this year, get to a perfect storm which could actually bring into the European project. We've got the potential of a Brexit, we've got Greece defaulting on its national debt, and then we've also got the migrant crisis, which has absolutely brought Europe to its knees in one way or another. And, you know, voting to leave could be the first thing that begins to unravel that project, and it's a project that's brought peace to Europe for 70 years.
Patrick, the unravelling of the EU, is that good or bad?
Across the European Union project, I'm sorry to say, it's a failed project, and just bear in mind, we are the 2nd largest benefactor of this European project. It's a controversial figure, there's going to be eyebrows, I'm sure. 350 million per week is sent to the European Union.
Follow.
Thank you very much. Listen, no, it works out. There is a form of tax rebate within this sum. Yes. The problem is nobody can put their finger on it because it fluctuates every single week according to the uncertainty of the single currency. That is how it works, and I'm sorry to say it is suppressed beyond belief. That's the fundamental issue here. And we talk about motions. We talk about motions being passed. We talk about debates in the EU Parliament, I should say. Bearing in mind that very few debates go on fundamentally in the unaccounted, undemocratic EU Commission. How many motions have been legislated by a British MEP in the Parliament in the last decade? The answer is 0. We've got no say. We've got no accountability. We have got no fundamental. We're like ants. I'm sorry to say, we are ants.
Max, you're making some faces during that.
On the 350 million, Patrick, if I gave you £10 and then you gave me back £5 and then all this went on, but then the National Statistical Authority said, actually, you don't pay 350 million. I'm not going to believe you on that, and that's because everyone has said you've lied. 350 million is not true. That's not how much we spend.
It's the gross amount per week.
It's the gross amount per week. If I pay for a record at a store, I pay £20 and I get back 1p and it was a £19.99 record, I've paid £19.99. This is just silly economics, and the National Statistics Authority said this is not true. Going back to the question, because we sort of drifted back into economics, which is back down this, what will it mean for the rest of European Union? And it's something which will impact the rest of Europe as a whole. And to say this is a failing project is to miss the point of the European Union. That is, the founders of the EU did not come about. The EU did not come about because we wanted to limit unemployment. The EU came about because we wanted to stop war between nations. We wanted to work together. And you could say, oh, NATO has prevented war. 2 NATO countries have gone to war with each other while being still members of NATO. Turkey and Greece went to war with each other over Cyprus. Only the European project has kept 500 million people together for the first time in about 2,000 years. We've been working together, not fighting. To say that this is a failed project is to fundamentally miss the point of the European project. and that is to make, like the founder said, like Arturo Spinelli, like Robert Schuman said, is to make the war between these countries competing, like we did for thousands of years, war completely not going to happen again. And as someone whose family generations ago suffered, people who died on the beaches of Gallipoli, people who died in the concentrators of Auschwitz, I think we need to look at what's the alternative to being close to our European allies. Is it to go back to competing nations around the world in trade wars? Because that's what started the 20th century with extremism in the world.
Oliver,
Yeah,
please.
take your point, but if I look at the Yugoslavian conflict, which I lived through, I saw them digging up graves in Srebrenica, 12,000 Muslim men on butchered by Milosevic and Radovan Karadzic. The EU weren't there to save them. NATO were there to save them. NATO kept Europe safe. NATO is the best security defence organisation in the world. American troops are there, British troops are standing shoulder to shoulder with American allies. It wasn't the EU coming in there, the EU didn't have any assets to go and move in there. It was NATO. Okay? NATO are keeping Russia at bay, if you believe in Putin's ideology. And actually that's one of the things why we got out. Juncker's idea of having a European army is just beyond belief stupid. It's one of the things actually I'll put myself in a firmly out camp. We don't need other major military assets. We don't need Europeans and nuclear weapons. We have a Security Council, we have NATO. It's kept the world safe in a reasonable way for the last years. It's kept Europe safe. It's kept the Russians, if the Cold War ended, not because of the EU, because of NATO.
Back to Max on this.
If you believe in NATO, if you believe that NATO and the reason we're in it, and the reason we're such a good organisation is your reason for voting out, that's a bit strange considering the General Secretary of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, came out and said it is better for the UK to remain a member of the EU. But apart from that, NATO was set up for a Cold War situation, to pit the world against each other. The Cold War no longer exists. The things that we face, that Europe faces today, terrorism, the threat of global nuclear power in Iran, the power of Russia growing, are not things we're going to solve with nuclear weapons. They're things we're going to solve with trade, diplomatic relations. It wasn't NATO which solved the Iran nuclear deal. It was Britain working through the EU, maximising impact and making those things happen. We're not going to solve issues that come up in the 21st century with NATO and nuclear weapons. We're going to solve it with diplomacy, with soft power through the EU.
Why did Juncker want the European army?
Well, I don't believe in nuclear.
I don't believe in nuclear.
I think
the EU democratically elected president wants the EU army. Okay, the French and Germans support that vision. Even to our new aircraft carrier may become a European aircraft carrier.
But it's not
a myth. That's what Juncker words. That's Juncker's words.
Those are his
He's the
words,
president of the EU, and he said, "I want the European army. That will keep Europe stronger, and we need to have our own military."
This is true. Europe wants to do stuff. That doesn't mean we have to do it. We have an opt-out. We have a veto on defence and security policy. The idea that if Juncker said, I want to create an army, I'll take your battleship, that's not going to happen. They have absolutely no say over our common foreign and security policy unless we say yes or no.
Okay, you guys in the middle have spoken a bit. Let's go back to the machine here. I think we were talking about, would this lead to the breakup of the EU? That's what it started.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know about the European army. I'm not going to pretend I do. The kind of perspective I come from in terms of how the EU's kept peace is that free trade fundamentally stops wars, and we can trade freely from the EU. I think that you need the EU and NATO. I don't think you can have one or the other. But going back to the original question and my original answer, absolutely, a Brexit will be the first thing that starts the end of the European Union.
And to finish off this question, back
on
to
that
Patrick.
note, I really must say the very premises of the EU army is enshrined within the Lisbon Treaty, the new common treaty from within the EU constitution. Article number 222 inscripts just the very narrative that will play out should we vote to stay within the European Union, and should any country, in fact, within the European Union will be absolutely bound to go to war with such and such in a result of civil war in one single country within the European Union. It's there enshrined, Article number 222 in the Lisbon Treaty, which will kick in come November 2017.
We might come back to defence in a little bit, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which has been submitted, and it wouldn't be an EU conversation without this. What level of immigration is too high a level of immigration? I'm going to start with Oliver on this.
There's no upper limit. I think the reason why Great Britain's called Great Britain is in the last 50 years we've had incredible immigration. We've brought culture, diversity, expanded our roots to this country, expanded our outlook, how we live in the country. And it's brought a huge amount of positive to our country. But actually, when we have about half and half EU migration out and non-EU migration, why should free movement stop at geographic borders? If we believe in free movement completely, why are we not going further into Russia, the Middle East, and Africa and say you can have free movement? Why is it just because you're in Turkey now we can be in Macedonia soon that you can come in free? Why are we bound here? If we need complete free movement. Now, for example, I want the best graduates out of the American business schools coming to London, creating businesses, bringing ideas here. Why can't they come here? They can't. Why can't the Canadians come here? I had a guy, Logan, from Kingston University, you might know him. He interned for me. We spent 5 months trying to get him a job for more than 22 grand so he could stay. He was educated. He spent 3 years here. Now, we can't have everyone, because actually, we are an army. I appreciate that. But at the same time, we've got to look where our natural neighbours are. We've got to be a bit global. I do video conferences every day with people in Dubai and Canada. So why is there such constriction? And the whole immigration debate needs to look just not the EU, but the global as well.
Roisin, let's talk about that. Again, let's go back to the original question. What level of immigration is too high a level of immigration?
I agree with Oliver. I don't think we can say there is a level that's too high. I think my good position is actually that the immigration debate is really toxic. I think people are using it as an excuse to scapegoat. I mean, let's face facts. If we vote to leave, and on Friday the 24th, we are not going to deport a couple of 100,000 people who are working, who are cleaning our hospitals, who are cleaning our schools, who are paying tax in this country. It's just not going to happen. And I think that one of the things, should we vote to leave, that the I'm assuming it will be Prime Minister Boris Johnson who's then going to be able to will find very hard to because we've got all these systems in place that we don't actually check out the number of people as they leave this country, therefore we don't have many people here. But I think that we have to see the economic benefit of migration, and a really great example of that, and this is going to sound really parochial, so I apologise, is I used to live in Herefordshire, which is a really agricultural economy, and we need thousands of people every summer to do fruit picking. And people come over for the summer, they fruit pick for a couple of months and they go back, and there's a massive backlash in the local community against this. So one year, all farmers said, okay, we're not actually going to advertise in Romania, etc. We're going to advertise in Herefordshire. And for the thousands of jobs, there has been two applicants in the local community, because it's this kind of myth that comes out in the Daily Express and things that people are taking our jobs is not true. A lot of the time, they're filling nets in the economy that aren't being done by Brits. In answer, I don't think there's a limit to what we pay.
Patrick, the immigration debate is toxic. What's your take on that?
Well, I think just what Tyson said, I do think immigration is a brilliant thing, and as you rightly say, they have contributed billions in tax over the past 10 years. But like anything, it does need to be managed. I don't, unless it's toxic debate, economics, I would say definitely transcends all debate on immigration. I think the fundamental problem is, as I say, it does need to be managed, and under EU regulations, we're not able to control who's coming from other EU states and coming to work in our country. It's completely uncountable. I'm sorry, I know
what about all the Brits that live abroad? How about the hundreds of thousands of Brits that live in Spain in kind of retirement colonies? If they came back into the UK, our NHS would be absolutely on its knees. And this is the thing that's always missing in the immigration debate, is everyone's always talking about who's coming here. We're not looking at the fact that actually net it's fairly neutral, because there's a very similar number of Brits who live abroad in the EU than there are other EU member states who come here.
You actually have to go further, look away from the EU constitution and go to the European Courts of Human Rights, which is actually constituted.
It's not linked to the EU.
No, it's not constituted outside the European Union. That's exactly right. They would have an issue if we were to say, right, we've left the European Union, you're out, goodbye. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
That's what I said.
I think the toxic debate comes in when people like your leader put those kind of posters up yesterday. Which were absolutely vile.
I'm not going to condone.
No, it's not. It's just that's what's coming from certain parts of the argument. a real issue here to be debated about and actually talked about. People like Farage make it a real Mickey Mouse issue by doing these horrible things.
And then actually it also stops us from having a real debate about it, because we can't talk about it, because there's an assumption that if you talk about it, you're going to go to the extremes of Farage very easily, which is also not the case.
Max, is the EU failing in controlling numbers of immigrants?
I would take the same opinion as Peter here, that there isn't really an upper limit of humans entering a bit of land. I think the Leave campaign has basically lost the economic argument. If they look at it, they have stopped talking about £350 million because that's wrong, and they've defaulted to their base, which is immigration. And it is scapegoating. It is very easy for them to play on people's fears. It is a very easy solution to say, oh, it's immigration, oh, it's the EU, which is the reason why the NHS is struggling, or we have a housing crisis. It isn't. It really isn't. It's the fault of domestic national governments. There's incompetencies in the UK which are being scapegoated, and it's honestly fear-mongering from their side. They have these huge posters the day a woman was shot as an MP, or murdered first time in front of refugees who she tried to campaign to allow into our country. I mean, immigration is such a brilliant thing economically and culturally, and to have it so toxified by this side of the referendum, because they've defaulted, because they have nothing else to talk about other than fear-mongering on immigration, is such a brilliant thing for our country. It is the reason why we're at the centre of the world, and why in 2012, when we had the Olympics happening, we did feel like we were at the centre of the world, because we are so open, because we are so outward-looking. And what kind of a signal would it send to our closest allies, to everyone around the world, Britain drawing up the borders and closing our borders and allowing Nigel Farage to set 10,000 quota limits?
Before we go back to Patrick, anyone from the floor got anything to say on English? Yeah, go for it.
I just want to say that I feel like immigrants get blamed for a lot of things like the NHS, but I agree with what we said, that it's not immigrants that put strain on the NHS, it's the fact that we have an ageing population. And that's why I agree that if we left the EU, it would be really bad, because there are so many English people living abroad in retirement that I'm not saying all of them will come back, some of them might, but either way,
Anyone else want to speak on that? Okay, right to reply from Patrick.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, on the point of people who have previously emigrated, I should say, to countries like Spain and France, whether they're retiring or whether they're just setting up business, whatever it may be, I think it would be very selfish of the Spanish government or Italian government, Greek government, because I'm sorry to say, their economics have been absolutely frittered. And as I say, you are looking at youth unemployment of 52% in Greece, 43% in Spain. I'm sorry to say, but these countries are on the absolute cliff end. I think it would be so ignorant and so blind of these governments to refuse British business. I'm sorry to say. Maybe that's a bit pedantic, but that's exactly how I see it. And I've already mentioned, I think immigration is a brilliant thing, and we have benefited from immigration. But I don't think people can shy away. There is apprehension. There is apprehension about immigration. It is about control. And I'm just going to play a bit closer to home now. Take Kingston Contempt, for example. Over the past decade, there has been demand for primary school places, secondary school places, housing. They are redeveloping all across the borough, and I'm sorry to say the demand is tough.
So the part that increased demand as well it's not just due to immigration, it's due to internal movement within the UK, as London has become increasingly more expensive. If you've got 2 kids, you don't have £900,000 to spend on a 3-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom house in Clapham. So people are moving, and people with families are moving down to this end of the country, and that's a lot of that is the impressions we've got on London pricing. Yes, there will have an impact on the rest of the demand gap, but I don't think that that's the main claim
Okay, Max, to finish this question.
Roisin is completely right. It's very easy to say it's immigration which is putting strain on primary schools, it's immigration which is causing delays in NHS waiting times, when actually it's a part of it. It is a part of it, it does matter, but it can also be part of a solution. We have people coming in as teachers. I know I have teachers in my 6th form who have come from Poland, who come from France, We have vast majority, 40,000 NHS workers come from EU countries. The British Medical Journal said leaving the EU would be a massive lack of resources and staff. I mean, what you've just done is scapegoated again. It's to say, no, that's the empirical definition of scapegoating is using one example to make a problem, to make an example and reason for a problem, which is primary school places. You have to look at a multitude of factors in this area. You can't just say immigration, because this is it's been made a dirty word by you, but it should be a brilliant thing we should celebrate.
Do you want to speak on this one?
Just very quickly. My only worry sometimes is not actually immigration into our countries, it's the impact of immigration from other people's countries. If I look at nurses, and we talk about nurses in the NHS, there are all these countries applying as nurses and teachers and stuff like that. What's happened to their countries? Their health systems, their education systems. So we're that kind of greedy Premier League kind of country where we're nicking all the staff over here, and what's happened to their health services? So is Europe actually creating this kind of Premiership football type of environment where we've got all the money, so you all come here? Where that I've been to Macedonia recently. I work very closely with their opposition at the moment. Their health system is on its knees. It's on its knees. I literally talk about that. John Paul got better first aid facilities than half the hospitals. But we'll get in trouble there. But we're taking all their nurses and all their doctors are coming over here. Their dentists are coming over here. Is that right? No, it's not. Okay, this was maybe about developing Europe as a whole. And if we're almost being quite selfish in a way. We're developing our health service based on that labour, but we're not developing their health services. And actually, that's not spreading. Education, health as a whole. Human rights should all have, and we shouldn't be robbing other countries of theirs.
We've got 15 minutes left. I've got a few questions submitted, but has anyone in here in the room got a question specifically? Any hands up? Aaron.
I don't understand how you can say there should be no limit on immigration. I'm pro-immigration, but surely so an extra million people is quite a large number, right? So how can something be limitless?
Because I think you have to look around and capacity. What is capacity? I drive around the whole England. There's plenty of space.
M25 is a nightmare, isn't it?
No, of course it is. But that's London. We've built a city for a certain amount of people.
Yeah.
We're probably London. We might have reached the kind of limit of what we can do. There's only so much more land we can keep. There's only so many more Kevin Davis's developments we can keep building.
Yeah.
Okay. At some point, there's a limit. Okay. So actually, we have to look around. Where do we build new towns? Where can we actually start more people to actually build our systems? We have to look at that. Now, of course, at some point there might be an upper limit. There might be an upper limit, but who knows? We're not there yet.
Max, an extra million people would be too many?
Well, an extra million people, I mean, that's intangible. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, there is a natural limit set to immigration. Of course, you have a surge when a new country is joined, or we'll definitely have a surge if we vote to leave, because those people will want to come while they still can and use their freedom of movement. But I think there is a natural limit that's set. The moment we set it, and because like this government's done, they set one, that means that, like you said, we have to not let people from the United States, from Canada, and it's national government, it's the Conservative Party, ideologically, who want to keep net overall immigration down, and that's the reason they're being so harsh on people from outside the EU, because they're moving forward in the EU, which I think is a good thing, because immigration, I think, free movement is good. But I think they're the ones that are setting controls on it. But there is a natural limit, and I don't see any time soon the 3% of UK that we've been built on, the rest isn't going to be used up in the next 2 years. I think we have more than enough space in our country. This idea that we're full is just a bit silly, I think.
On other countries, they're harsh as well. I'm trying to get business visas in America 3 times and failed every time. Okay, Australia, who's gone to Australia so far? You get a 2-year visa, you've got to pick fruit for 6 months, you want to stay an extra longer time. We're not forcing people to go and pick fruit for 6 months to stay extra, so it's not just the British government.
So Patrick, can you address that's concern?
Well, we are in fact the second most densely populated country in Europe as a whole, so we are counted to that degree. With regards to public services like the NHS, it all comes down to supply and demand. And I'm not going to scapegoat anyone in this instance, because God knows the NHS has been undersupplied, courtesy of the Tory government for far too long. There is a demand that comes with people and with quotas, and immigration does play into that to a large degree. So unfortunately, whilst people will say that we can control it because we're not a member of Schengen, but whilst we retain a European Union passport, we are part of this project, and it is an open landmass. People can go there at their own accord. That's the fundamental issue.
Over to Roisin on this one.
I mean, at the moment, I'm pro-immigration. I think that the issue also with putting a cap is that you've got to see it in terms of percentage increase in terms of the whole global population, and that's also one of the issues we've got in terms of housing NHS. Is the fact that the global population, it's not just the number of people coming over here, has been rising, and I think, I mean, it might sound slightly controversial to say that's another thing we have to look at, because I'm not suggesting anything kind of harsh, by the way, into that, but I mean, I think while the world's population is growing, we want to be able to travel, we want to be able to go to foreign language, things like that. Why should we not be able to have the same kind of benefit in the UK? I just don't I don't see what benefit having an exact number would put on it, because what if reach that number and then the Japanese equivalent of Tim Peake wants to come and set up business in the UK? Are you going to say no to them? I think it has to be far more flexible than a lot of people are painting.
I just thought the limitless term was quite far out. So yeah, but no, I can completely agree with what you say. But,
I've got 3 more questions and 10 more minutes. This one has been submitted by Lorna. As a member of the LGBT community, how will my rights be affected by leaving or staying in the EU? Let's go to Max on that one first.
I mean, we've come very far in the UK with LGBT rights issues. I mean, we're quite a way away from Orlando currently, thank goodness. And a lot of these things have been done nationally. I mean, it's not the EU that has done this, but the EU is a safety net for marginal groups, for groups which might be different ethnicities, might be different sexualities, might be different religions, and that's because the European Union, as you have much cited, Lisbon Treaty contains something called a Charter of Fundamental Rights. These evil regulations happen in business where if someone's black, someone's white, someone's Jewish, someone's Christian, they get paid the same for doing the same role, same as someone's gay. I mean, we had the case a few years ago in Northern Ireland where this gay couple went to a bakery and said, you know, cake our wedding, and the business said, no, we're not going to do that. And the gay couple took the case to the European Court of Human Rights, which is separate from the EU, but the EU forces us to accept their judgments, because obviously Russia's in the European Court of Human Rights, but they're not taking any notice of judgments. The EU forces us to accept these judgments. What happened was that the company was fined for it, because they're providing a service to the community, to the LGBT community. And the EU was set up basically to protect the rights of those that can protect versus David versus Goliath. The EU was set up to protect the Davids, to protect minorities. And in this world where otherwise we're confusing with the regulations being cut and equality regulations being cut, I think the EU is a very good safety net for the LGBT community, especially.
Oliver, does that come into your decision?
Yeah, it does. I actually left the mainstream political party over the gay marriage issue. Some of my party members were not. If the EU were that concerned by this issue, why is gay marriage not legalised across the European Union as one common policy? Why are the countries still not recognising it? So actually Britain are the leader in this, and Cameron went against the whole party. And let's be frank, that Conservative Party up to and he went against it, he stood up for it, and he did it. And he took a real brave decision, because a lot of Conservative people would never go near that issue, and he took it on. Why have the EU not done it? Why have the EU not forced the Italians to recognise gay marriage? Why are the Italians not going to the Vatican and saying, sorry, EU, gay marriage will happen? And that's my point. If the EU that power, they would have done it.
Did it come from the EU or from the UK government, the human rights rules?
They come from the UK government. You've got, as you say, the European Court of Human Rights, and you do have the safety net. And I think that, again, on this issue, for me, it goes back to the fact that I believe that we are guaranteed peace in Europe if we're a member of the EU, and it tends to be in times of war when rights tend to be eroded. We're very fortunate in the UK that we live in a very liberal with a small L country, very accepted. And I just hope that actually one of the positive impacts that we can have on the rest of the EU is how we control our rights.
Actually, do we need the EU to happen to us?
No, absolutely not. As has been touched on, 9 countries fail to recognise gay marriage as a fundamental human right, and they've got no intention of doing so. There is a legislation underneath the European Convention of Human Rights, which is not suggested. But that's focused on this regard. UK government has worked years, decades, to legalise gay marriage, as they have done. I mean, the 2001 Discrimination Act was legislated. That was a UK policy, as was gay marriage legislation when it was legislated back in 2013, which I was very happy to see. No, the EU's played no part when it comes to LGBT social charter.
Back to Max on that.
I mean, we should stop saying that we're being dragged along by Brussels, forcing us to do things. What we should do, vote Remain, then go into the European Parliament, go into the Commission and say, this is some things that Britain wants to happen. We want to push things forward. No, because Cameron went saying, I'm going to leave unless you give me everything I want. If we actually go and say what? We want to actually leave the EU. We want to talk to the Italian opposition parties who say we want gay marriage and infuse them. I mean, the EU is actually doing a lot. The EU is finding the Italian government every day for not recognising gay marriage.
What about the German government? Where's Ms Merkel being prosecuted?
Ms Merkel is not being prosecuted. She isn't committing a crime. The government is being fined every day for not recognising gay marriage. I mean, the EU is doing things to help gay people. I mean, the LGBT community is massively benefited by Britain being in the EU, being a strong voice in the EU, and pushing our rules, our liberal democratic roots across the whole continent. I mean, we're going to do that far better when we're closely tied to them.
You know, we're currently a pigment society. We can pick and choose what we want to be a part of, and that surely fundamentally breaks up what the EU is going to be about.
I mean, the EU
Germany won't recognise it. It's a ridiculous thing that people aren't recognising. It's 2016. We're not back in the feudal ages now. And there's no defence about it in Europe. And actually, this is why reason why I'm 55 out is things like this. Because actually it's the right thing to be doing, and actually they can't pick and choose out of things.
And if the EU came to the UK and said something on a social issue, you have to do this, we have to force this review because 27 other countries disagree, we'd say no, because that's undemocratic. If the people of Germany, if you believe in democracy, I don't agree with them, but if 51% of people in Germany voted to say we don't recognise gay marriage, it's awful, we have to accept it, it's democratic. You talk about the EU having a democratic deficit. We have to balance the rights of people. Of course, gay people should be able to marry people, and we will continue to fine the German government, the Italian government.
But if it was a fundamental social charter, it would have been legislated in this country regardless
That's why
of democracy.
they're being funded. That's why they're being fined, because they're not adhering to the social chapter.
Right, to Roisin.
I mean, I think on the issue of gay marriage, that actually the EU member states thing, to me, it kind of feels a bit similar to looking at the United States of America, and actually, you have laws that you do at federal level and laws that you do at state level, and this is the same thing in the US. I personally feel this is one of the reasons why I want to stay in, because this is an issue that Britain should be leading the European Union and not leaving it. And I also have quite an issue with when you talk about how we don't have an influence in Europe, because a lot of my family live in Germany, and they are absolutely aghast at what the UK gets away with in the EU. They sit there and they say, if Angela Merkel went to the European Commission and tried to do this, we'd be laughed out of there. Yet everyone gives Britain special treatment, and I think that there's an issue with the way in which it's been portrayed in the UK media, because that just never comes across.
Related to this, there's a question. Which has the greater democratic deficit, the UK or the EU? As you were talking, continue talking on this one.
What do you mean by democratic deficit?
That's what the question says, so I presume it's...
I mean, I think that there's I think there are a lot of problems with the EU, and I don't think but again, one of the things that really irks me about this debate is when everyone talks about how democratic the EU is. We all elect MEPs. I mean, over 35% of people go out and vote, but that doesn't mean that we don't elect them. And I think fundamentally, one of the bigger issues, I mean, there does need to be restructuring, we can't get away from that, but actually, the EU needs to think about how it's communicating itself with people, because a lot of the reason inability to communicate the benefits of the European project. I don't really understand what a democratic deficit is, so I can't say. I could go on to a whole thing about first past the post versus proportional representation. I'm not going to. I think that actually one of the big issues is not a lack of democracy, it's a lack of engagement. And that's something that we not only have to look at the EU level, but on so many things. Switzerland, for example, have 4 referendums a year where people get to vote on critical parts of legislation. As a result, the Swiss population are far more engaged because they get asked, as opposed to once every 4 or 5 years, and then asked about their potholes and things every 4 years. they actually get asked on key bits of legislation. Maybe that's the sort of model we should be looking at, and that would help with a democratic deficit, if I'm kind of understanding that correctly.
We'll go left to right. Oliver next.
EU president not elected, EU commissioners not elected.
None of our civil servants.
If I look at our EU commissioner old Tony Blair, Peter Madison, he was sacked 3 times by Blair. He was sacked 3 different times, and suddenly he ends up in Europe on a wage more than the Prime Minister. Okay. Now that's just wrong. It's simply wrong. You've failed, you've been fired 3 times, and then you've been fired 3 times again. You're very kind of wrong. Those are the stuff that are completely wrong. And coming back and looking, Europe is a tipping point. Just because whatever we do on next week, who knows Hofer in Austria? Hofer, is a neo-Nazi. He's a right-wing neo-Nazi. He was 31,000 votes of being the Austrian president a month ago. You want me to share a foreign policy with him? You want me to share anything with that man? And you want me to be next to him in a photo, my leader next to him? No way. Okay? And that's why, when Europe is going through these turmoils, I don't want to be part of that. Okay? Because I know Britain will make the right choices. But other parts of Europe, I look at Italy, I look at France, Le Pen, and they're nutters there. I look in Austria. I'm sorry, there's too much I don't want to be part of. I don't want to make sure we can guarantee our integrity on our own.
Max, too much that we can't be a part of.
Those people, the Marine Le Pens, the Wilbert Hoppers, are feeding off the exact same thing that his Believe campaign is facing. That is particulism, it's nationalism, it's isolationism.
It wouldn't include the vote, actually. No, it's not anymore extremism. When you win 50 or 49.7% of the national vote, that is not opportunism, that is mainstream.
I mean, it is, if, Francois, Marine Le Pen, she's still being extreme politically. I mean, it might be just because a populist candidate wins a vote. Donald Trump is still an extremist just because he's been won the presidential by a majority. But on a basic level on this, I mean, democratic deficit means that you don't have basically the exact level of a perfect democracy. So a perfect democracy would be one where you vote on everything. So everything would be referendums. Of course, we can't do that, it's not practical, so we have representative democracy, which I believe in. I believe that electing an expert to make decisions on behalf of you who I trust is probably a good idea. And I think that if we're comparing, is the UK government more accountable, is the EU Parliament more accountable? We don't have an elected head of state, we don't have half of our Parliament elected in the House of Lords, we have people who sit in the House of Lords because they're bishops, we don't have we don't.
They've given lots of money to political
parties.
They've
given lots of money to political parties. We have an electoral system for the only elected part of our Parliament, the House of Commons, which is fundamentally undemocratic, where a party which you'd probably like to see have more power, UKIP, get 3 million votes and only 1 MP, 4 million votes. And I obviously, can be improved. The EU is not a finished project, neither is the UK government. The UK government, if Jeremy Corbyn came in, I'm sure he wouldn't get rid of the House of Lords. I don't think he will get in. But the European Parliament is constantly changing. The EU is constantly moving. It's not a finished project. You have people from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. You have people from the Socialist and Democrat Party, Gianni Patelli, head of the Socialist and Democrats, the second biggest party of the European Parliament, who says, we want an elected European Commissioner. We want an elected European Commissioner. We have to side with these people and push for it. The reason why we can't move on with these structural changes, make it more democratic, is because national governments like David Cameron don't want this elected European president with far more votes than he's ever got, having, a mandate.
Patrick, democracy and sovereignty.
Well, democracy and sovereignty both is important. One, we've got an ounce of through Westminster, and the Westminster system is not perfect, to say the least, but it is a democratic process, as is devolved powers to Hollywood and Wales and the London Assembly. We've touched on to far-right nationalism, which obviously stinks. It's a terrible prospect, but then part of you has to ask yourself, where does that nationalist sentiment, where does it resonate with people? Where does it get so desperate to the point that they are democratically, nearly, dare I say, nearly electing these people, flooding across EU countries, whether it be down to immigration or whether it be down to the economy, whatever it is. I'm not going to scare them. There's number one. There's a spectrum of errors running throughout the EU project, and it resonates in various EU nations. As I say, EU Commission unelected, EU presidents unelected. We could touch on how the monarchy and the House of Lords aren't electable, which frankly they're not, and the system's not perfect. But these people do pay a hell of a lot of tax on a net basis to the UK. They do.
I want to try and get through 2 more questions actually. So those students, this has been sent in. I don't want to be in the EU, but I even less want to be under a Boris Johnson government. Which is the lesser of those 2 evils? We'll go on Patrick first.
The lesser of those 2 evils, well, frankly, I can't quite picture, in all honesty, Boris Johnson as one, the leader of the Tory party, and certainly not Prime Minister, for the simple fact that people predominantly outside of London just don't get him. He lives in this London bubble, and that will never escape it. I mean, it's whether you're a Tory member or whether you're a Labour, no one gets it. Outside of London, nobody understands Boris Johnson. And bearing in mind all of the democratic process that we haven't touched on, I think if social history teaches us anything, it's how often the Tory party belittle the EU project as a whole, because they are completely incohesive. They will never agree. As far as the European Union is concerned. And I think I'm not going to start tempting fate, but I can't quite picture another Tory majority anytime soon. But that's democracy. Deselect these people. The same cannot be said for the EU Commission or EU presidents.
And the Remainers, I think we probably know which you think is the lesser of 2 evils. So I'm going to skip through that in this case and go straight to Oliver.
I think this is kind of the last couple of campaigns we've had, the London Mayor campaign and the EU campaign. It's kind of like the Royal Rumble in wrestling. We've had all these people running the ring and start shouting about this and this and this. And what's actually a good thing here, we've ruined a lot of political careers. A lot of idiots have had their careers where they've just been done stupid campaigns. The London Mayor campaign, whether it be Corbyn just standing up and last week deciding to launch his campaign. Oh, thanks Corbyn, thanks for that help from the Labour Party. So if you really believed you wanted to be in, you launched your campaign last week and then you rush a Sky News interview this week to try and get your point across. So you've done nothing. Tim Farron has done nothing. He's shown, I'm sorry, he's done nothing. He can't get involved into this very important issue for this country. Boris has ruined his career. George Osborne's, he's back in his hole. He's gone. He's finished. 50 letters already into the 1942 committee, I'm sure, for his name. And I think you actually breed new thinking. We're going to get some new people in politics. We're going to get hopefully some of the 2010 intake. We've now had 5 years in Parliament, fresh ideas, fresh mindset. Not the Tory elites, and not the. Let's be honest, not just the Tory elites. There's plenty of millionaires on the Labour side as well here. Let's not all think they're all like poor because they come from working class families. They don't. The middle band certainly aren't. Okay, and I think we'll get a new fresh approach to completely from. I think someone like Dominic Raab would end up winning with someone like him. I think if it's someone like that. I think if you get a 2010 take someone completely new, and I think we might have a Prime Minister in 2 months that you might not have heard of.
I'm going to skip to the last question. Will Brexit lead to the breakup of the UK? We'll start with Rachel.
I think realistically it could. I think that, more to the point, I think it will lead to a second Scottish referendum. What the outcome of that referendum will be, I don't think we can prejudge, because again, we actually don't know what will happen with the EU. Scotland is more pro-EU than a lot of the rest of the country, as is Wales. And if they voted heavily to remain in the EU and the UK voted to leave, I think they would have their rights to a second referendum. I just think there will be a second referendum.
Patrick?
Honestly, no, I do agree with the sentiment that Scotland is more pro-EU than in other parts of the UK. But the simple fact is there is support for Euroscepticism up at Scotland. I talk about all these fishermen that have their livelihoods frittered away. There is honest Euroscepticism. You do have to bear in mind the Scots had their democratic rights to potential independence on the 24th of September 2014. I believe it was. Nicola Sturgeon, she's still the reigning queen of Scottish Parliament. Don't get me wrong, but support for the SNP is decreasing to some degree. I think people are. Sorry.
Did you see the same elections that we just saw?
No, let me. No, yes, she got the most seats.
So she got most support.
Yeah, she's
Nationalist Party's won over 60% of the votes.
Yeah, I think that
Not
it's
quite
factually
60%.
inaccurate to say that support for the SNP is waning.
Also.
Yeah, the Greens got 6 seats with proportional representation.
That's
It's not
still
over.
6%.
We'll move on, Max. Does the breakup of the UK seem a likely outcome if Brexit happened?
On the Friday 24th, we wake up, we'll still be Great Britain, everything will still happen. But over time, I think it could be threatened. I think if the true patriotic cause in this referendum, if we're going to call it that, is to vote Remain, because I think Britain is better together. I mean, Scotland, if the polling data is right, Scotland and Wales both vote in, and they both have massive nationalist movements, Plaid Cymru in Wales and the SNP in Scotland, and I think Nicola Sturgeon's very intelligent. She'll wait her time, she'll wait for the Conservative government to have more incompetencies, she'll let the referendum sink in, and she'll call a second one, and Scotland may leave. We haven't talked a lot about Northern Ireland, and actually the EU is intrinsic for the Northern Irish peace process. I mean, we have half of the members of the Northern Irish Assembly are people who are nationalists, and people that are unifying with a different country. And so part of the reason why the Irish Agreement happened was because we have such a close tie with Ireland through the European Union. I think the idea that we sort of forgotten that the IRA happened, had this massive conflict, this massive terrorist conflict with people who wanted to secede from the UK. That was only 20 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago when that happened. I think we're all too easy to forget about one of the most historic nationalist movements. I think it may well break up the UK in the long term, especially Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Oliver?
I don't think we should be worried. I think every country has the right to determine their status. If the Scots want independence, they're right to have it. They're an independent country. If the Welsh want it one day, they should have the right. Why should we dictate something to be in a club? If we part of the United Kingdom, and actually, it's up to the Scottish people to decide that. You know what? They know that they won't be allowed in the European Union because of the Catalan and the Spanish will veto that. But they're actually going to tell themselves. And if Nicola Sturgeon can gather up enough support for the Scottish to go alone, they go alone, then who am I to say as a Cornishman and a Londoner that you can't? She wants their decision. We shouldn't have any influence over that. That's up to the people of Scotland to decide that. Do I think it will happen? Yes. And I don't think, within 10, 15 years, the Welsh will do it? Yes.
We're on about an hour now, and it's supposed to be 45 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Well, as we do, let's just have a closing statement from each panellist here. If you can try and keep it to a minute again, and we'll go from Patrick to Roisin here. Last words before these guys go and vote on Thursday.
Well, there have been a number of misconceptions sold about the European Union. Everything from rights to LGBT, civil war, dare I say. So many misconceptions that cannot be addressed while we're a member of this club, for the simple fact that they are taken behind closed doors. It's got to be to an You're on the Titanic, you've got anti-black. Are you going to grab it, or are you just going to fall in the sinking ship, I should say? My thinking is you should jump on the lifeboat, put it on your head, and get out while you can. I want to see the UK as a self-serving, democratic, accountable nation. Again, it's not a perfect nation, but we've retained the 5th largest economy in the world. We import 40% more to the European Union than we export per capita. The only GDP that's going to be dropping, if God forbid, it's not going to happen if we stop trading, is Germany's, the French, the Italians, you name it.
Max?
I would disagree fundamentally with everything he's just said. Obviously, because that's the point of the democratic process. And I'm very grateful that we're taking this decision on the 23rd, because I want the EU to be part of the national conversation. I think that the best thing for Britain, for the century to come, for 21st century, for our generation, would be to stick with it. And that's not because I think it's perfect. It's not. And I would agree with everyone here, I think, by saying the EU is not perfect, but nothing is. We shouldn't be arguing with perfect You're being asked to weigh up the pros and cons. You're being asked. What do you fear more? Is it a possible immigration scare? Is it the fact that the EU isn't a perfect democracy? Neither is our House of Commons, neither is our government. Or is it the risk of massive economic decline? Don't take my word for it. Christine Lagarde said our economy will drop. Is it the risk that our NHS wouldn't be funded? Don't take my word for it. Again, take the word of a British medical journal. You have to look at it from a multi-view angle. It's easy to say immigration in the EU you could fear hate-monger about them, that they're the root, of course, for all the problems in our country. We're still going to be a great country if we leave, but we'll be diminished. And I don't want Britain to be diminished in the 21st century. I think we need to work together with other countries. We need to work together with our closest allies. We need to work and make this project work. Because what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Nations competing. Small nations competing against each other in Europe. And for millennia upon millennia, that happened, and we had wars, and we had genocides. And I seriously need to think, what is the alternative to the European Union? Because we could spell the end of it by voting leave. Because we're invested in this for thousands of years. 600 years ago, half of the British land was in France. We are completely linked to this continent. And the fallout from any future wars that might affect the continent if we leave will ripple across and we'll be hit with the debris. I think we need to lead in Europe and not leave it.
I think from my side, my strong I'm scared of the future EU, I'm scared of what even the EU have aspirated to create the EU as. Even today, Turkey's membership, Turkey's border guards, 4 hours ago, shot dead 11 refugees on the border, 11 kids, shot dead. It's not a member of the EU for me. That's not how I want our members to act. I don't want some right-wing nutter in Austria coming to power, and that's been the same policy. In the UN Security Council, the current member, since 1945, we have influence in the world. The British brand of the world is the strongest ever. Any country, when I go to, whether it be Nigeria, I go to the Caribbean, I go to India, the British brand is everything. It's not the EU brand. You're not going to know the European brand so strong as the British brand. Why did the tough to buy Land Rover and Jaguar? Because it's been the strongest British brand. We should be proud of what we've got. And we should build on what we've got. I don't necessarily, someone in Latvia is a natural neighbour for me. I don't know anything about Latvia. I could probably name you the capital on a quiz just that I could get there probably. But you know what? I can tell you 100 things about Australia, USA, Canada, Singapore. They're the people we should aspire to be in a club with. And they're the people who are working on deals with. The EU is too big an organisation to go and do those deals. The EU should have had a deal with America right now. The EU should have an administration that has done it. They haven't. And that's what I want to see from a global world, because in the next 50 years, we won't be working with people like Latvia. The Chinese, the Indian markets, they're the global players now. And I want to be sidelines, but I want to be next to those guys. I want all our focus to be on those guys. Not trying to bail out the Greek economy the whole time. And we haven't, thank God. We only put 600 million in. We still have 600 million. For the Germans, how much happening there? Even Germany, like Merkel's in a power position. It's not trying to put the hand in the house. It's not the EU money, it's German money. And how many more countries are going to bail out one day when the Spanish economy gets bust, the Italian economy gets bust? Because look at the numbers. So,
over to Rasheen for the last words.
Thank you. So, first of all, thank you everyone who came this evening. I just think this debate is such a complex issue, and I think that my biggest disappointment with the whole campaign has actually been the way in which both sides of the Remain and Leave have just sent in sound bites and rhetoric. So the first thing I would say is that before any of you go and vote on the 23rd of June on Thursday, please go and read the I voted Remain because I believe fundamentally the project of my Leave we should be leading the EU, not leaving it to use a soundbite. But I believe that it has helped the peace of the continent for the last 70 years, and for me, that's fundamentally why I Remain.
Okay, that's a wrap. I think we should give the panellists a round of applause. Thank you, pal. And thanks